Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 8th of July of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with Turkey, of course. As you know, the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, visited Turkey, had talks with Erdogan, and they discussed the NATO, they discussed the situation, and we discussed the situation in the morning video. And as a result of those negotiations, as you know, the Vladimir Zelensky was given his Azov criminals, those commanders who was the commanders of defending of Mariupol in 2022, and according to the negotiations and according to agreements that were made by the Russians, Turkey and Ukraine, these commanders should have stayed on the territory of Turkey until the end of the special military operation. But for some reasons, the president of Turkey, Erdogan, took a decision to break the deal and to return these criminals, according to the Russian sources, to Zelensky. And basically something interesting is happening currently on this area. Of course, after that we got a lot of videos, a lot of opinions, a lot of analytics were saying their own opinion. A lot of people started blaming Erdogan that he is a traitor, that he broke the friendship with Putin, he supported Zelensky, and that he broke the deal, and so on. Another military experts were saying that Erdogan took a decision to do this because the Russians during the previous months were bombing the proxy Turkey forces on the territory of Syria, and so on, and many other things. Now I'll give you my own opinion. I have analyzed the situation as well, and basically I have created my own understanding of this situation, and my own understanding is completely differs from this piece of information and the opinions that you got by now. First of all, you need to understand that there are no break of the deal between Erdogan and Putin. There are no break of friendship between these two peoples. It was a very beautiful game that were played by three actors, by Zelensky, Erdogan and Putin, and this is the game when all of them, either Zelensky, Erdogan and Putin, got a lot of benefits. But before that, let's start step by step. First of all, one more time, the negotiations and the agreement was that these people, according to the Russian sources, criminals, should have stayed on the territory of Turkey until the end of the special military operation. But for some reason Zelensky visited this country and he got back these people, and with them he returned back to the territory of Ukraine. What did happen? First of all, you need to understand one thing, that in the second decade of July, the Russians were planning to stop and to break the grain deal. As you know, according to this deal, the Ukrainians were allowed to send their grain from the port in Odessa in direction of Turkey, and after that from Turkey in direction of World Ocean, and so on. That was the deal. And according to that deal, the Russians were able to also to sell their grain and many other goods to the worldwide, and mainly in Africa. But the Russians, as soon as this deal was signed by the Russians, Ukrainian and Turkey, the Russians were following every single paragraph in that deal since the beginning of that agreement. But when talking about, and of course the Turkey as well, the Turkey made their job perfectly. They did everything that was in that agreement. But when talking about Ukraine and the Western countries, this side of the contract haven't completed even a single paragraph, because since the beginning of this grain deal, the Russians haven't sold even a single kilogram of the grain to the worldwide, or especially to Africa. And that was not a grain deal, that was a grain accumulation of Russia, because the Ukrainians under the cover of that deal were receiving a lot of munition, tanks, a lot of things, weapon and so on. And of course there was the ships that were selling grain, maybe something else, who knows, but that was a real support and supply Ukraine using the sea with weapon. It's the part of that deal that nobody knows, nobody discussed, and that was accumulation. And as you know, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russian Federation, and the Russia itself were trying to break the deal maybe 4 or 5 times since the beginning, since the creation of that deal. I remember just in this year they were trying to break the deal in January, maybe probably in April, and that was the final prolongation, and we start receiving talks and rumors that the Russians were planning to break the deal in the second decade of July. But there's one important thing that you need to know about the Russians and the Russia and Russia itself. That since the beginning maybe of 2000s, I don't remember even a case when the Russians were breaking any deal. So every time, no matter the deal, no matter the contract that the Russians signed, they followed every single paragraph. You know that this is like personal quality of the President Vladimir Putin, the President of Russian Federation. He also followed the deal. Always. And that the grain deal wasn't an exception. The Russians were following this deal perfectly without any problem from their side. But they saw that the Western countries weren't following anything, and that was a real humiliation. And the Russians were planning to break the deal, but they couldn't find a real legal way how to do this. They can't break the deal. They can't break the deal and to show themselves to the worldwide that this is they who have broken the deal, and this is they who have let's say cut supply road of grain to the poor countries in Africa and so on. The Russians didn't want to walk out of this deal with a very bad face. They wanted to get out from this deal with a very lucky and happy face that this is not their fault. And basically we can say, it's my opinion, that Erdogan another time in his life made a very big favor for the Russians. Don't think that this was some kind of a present or surprise. I believe that there was a call between Erdogan and Putin, and basically Putin told Erdogan, listen, you need to break the deal and you need to give this people to Zelensky. And if you break the deal, Ukraine and Erdogan, Turkey break the deal, this will give us possibility to have a legal way to break the grain deal. That's it. This is just the, like casus belli, giving the Russians power to break the grain deal and not to follow this grain deal in the second decade of July, so within 2 weeks. That's it, nothing more. And Erdogan, of course, as a friend of Putin, he understands the real benefits that he can get from this situation. And currently we know that Erdogan has just one face. He has a face of a person who supports Ukraine, who goes in the same direction with NATO, and of course for just normal European people, Western countries people, he's a good guy. He's a good guy who at this point of special military operation take a decision to choose the side, and he chose the side of Ukraine. So Erdogan has a lot of benefits in face of Western countries, United States of America, and of course of Western money and Western investments. When talking about Zelensky, of course, he got the biggest benefits. The first one is that he managed to return these guys, these heroes, according to the Ukrainian side, and currently they're returning back home, and he got significant media victory. People more support him, people are happy, and he's happy as well, because we know that during the Ukraine counter-offensive operation in the South Ukraine, the Ukrainians were defeated. Let's talk about the truth. The Ukrainians were completely defeated. They lost a lot of armored vehicles, and basically they need some case, they need something big to cover that situation and to show people that we got another victory. And this is the benefits that Zelensky managed to get as a result of returnance of this Azov crime. And when talking about the Russians, they got also victory, because currently, and everybody understands in Russia, that Putin has legal rights to break the deal and not to follow anymore and not to prolong this deal. And of course, people will respect him for this, because he has, let's say, balls, but yeah, that he's a man and he will not follow the situation, and not because the fact that he doesn't want, because that unreliable partners have broken the deal. Not him. He's good. He's angel. He's the man who followed every single paragraph of the deal, but the partners from Ukraine and Turkey broke the deal, and now he doesn't have any option, but he needs to break the deal as well. This is exactly what did happen with this entire situation. There is no like Syrian proxy forces that were bombed. There is no threatening from traitoring from Erdogan and nothing else. Just the situation, a very nice game, and every single of them got significant benefits in face of their people, in face of the Western countries, and in face of all the world. The Russians haven't lost their reputation because they haven't break any deal yet. Erdogan got a lot of benefits in front of Ukrainians and people from Western countries, and Zelensky returned the hero back. Everybody won, everybody is happy. The thing is not about the deal. The thing is about the consequences of this decision. And after the visit of Erdogan in Turkey, Zelensky went to the north, back to Ukraine, and he landed for a while on the Snake Island. And now the story, and this is the most interesting part of the story. You know, just small my small analysis. Every time when Zelensky visits something, a few days later, months later, a very big thing happened in there. For example, if you remember, after a few months when Zelensky visited Bakhmut fell and it was renamed in Archimovsk. After Zelensky visited months ago south of Ukraine, he was in Kurahovo, he was awarded the Ukrainian forces of 38 of those Marine brigades who were involved in the offensive operation. Months later, the Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation. When Zelensky visited Kherson, months later, there was explosion on Kakhovka Dam. Every single time Zelensky visits a settlement and Ukrainians media pays attention to this area, something very big is happening. And currently, Zelensky, by visiting Snake Island, let's call it, started the second battle for Snake Island. Because now there are no agreement. At least there are still agreement, but after by the 20th of July, there are going to be no agreement. And the thing is, the most interesting thing about this non-agreement is that there are questions I have, because it was the Russians who were planning to break the deal, not the Ukrainians. The situation with this prisoners exchange, it was the game when everybody wanted to gain their own benefits. But it was the Russians. The Russians were doing everything to break this deal. And that means that the Russians do have power, do have resources to block this area physically with their ships, with missiles, with navy drones, and so on. And Zelensky visited Snake Island like saying, who controls Snake Islands control the passage, to control the grain deal passage. So I believe and I expect that by the 20th of July, the Russians will send their fleet, or they will start a real blockade of this territory with the fleet, with missiles, with ships, with everything they have. They will block this area and they will stop flying of United States, United Kingdom drones like Global Hawk and so on. They will try to establish 100% over the Black Sea. I believe that Ukrainians do have enough of Navy drones and another type of weapons to destroy Russian fleets and to attack them while they're in the sea. So I expect that the breaking of the grain deal was a real plan, is a part of plan from Russian side to begin real escalation and to intensify actions in this territory and to establish 100% control over at least this part of the Black Sea. So that's it, nothing more. And Zelensky just like tried to get as much as possible. He visited this Snake Island and he started this operation. Now let's move to the front lines. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation gave us more updates, new numbers, as we discussed in the previous videos. According to the Russian sources, the Ukrainians managed to land create another points of pressure a little bit to the northeast of Kakhovka, not Kakhovka, of Antonov Bridge, but the Russians continue bombing Ukrainian positions, and as a result of those attacks, the Ukrainians lost another 40 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system. Furthermore, one more time, Zelensky published the video how he visited this Snake Island, just the one thing that he visited, and the sources are saying that he did this under cover of the ships, of trade ships that were running along the Black Sea. So now we're moving further and we are getting to Pyatikhatki. Today I have updated the map. As you can see, Pyatikhatki is no longer under Ukrainian control, but they're not also under Russian control. This settlement is in the gray zone. The Ukrainians, they want to be more precise, the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade had significant losses on this area and were forced to step back, and probably they were moved to the mainland to regrouping and so on. The Russians also published another video how they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainians during the massacre, bloody attacks from the Ukrainian side that took place during the previous few days and so on. As you can see, the Russians were using just the regular drones even to hunt and to attack not just armored vehicles, but a regular infantry. Imagine yourself, if you can't have enough of drones to attack one drone, one soldier, it's very difficult to calculate the the number of the real number of drones that the Russians have if they can spend them this way. So the Ukrainians were defeated and were forced to step back. They haven't made any attempt to return positions or to attack or to restart any offensive operation in the direction of Vasilievka. When talking about Bradley Square, the same situation. The Russians reported that they bombed and destroyed the ammo depot of 65th Brigade in Orekhov, and also the Russians published another video of the previous episode of clashes during the previous day, how they destroyed another armored vehicle somewhere along the forest lines in this area. The Ukrainians haven't made like real attempts to attack. The Russians are saying that there were few recos in combat in this area. The Russians continue regrouping, the Ukrainians continue regrouping. It's very interesting what is going to be the next step, but I believe the Ukrainians will continue this operational pause. Of course, the Russians will start their own counter-offensive operation, and they will try to return their positions that they lost during the previous battles, if they see that Ukrainians can't do anything more. Now we are moving further. We are going to Vremivka tactical bridgehead. There were no updates as well. Today we got a very interesting video from Novodarivka. This video dated at the beginning of June, when the Ukrainians just launched this counter-offensive operation, the greatest attack. But I believe this video is very old, but I believe that we need to see this one more time. As you can see, the Ukrainians sent a convoy, and this video is geolocated. At some point they got the forest line, and as you can see, they got into real minefield, and so basically every single armored vehicles in this area was destroyed, and they got to the minefield. As you can see, there's dozens of armored vehicles with infantry, with soldiers, and they were completely destroyed during that attack. So imagine yourself the real results of that attack. We can see just small episodes of that situation, but imagine yourself the real results. And today the Russians published the same video, but from the other angle, from the back, from maybe is very bigger, powerful drone. The same picture, more and more armored vehicles are coming, and they're just blowing up on the minefield. That was a bloody day for the Ukrainians during that counter-offensive operation. The Ukrainians continue bombing and shelling Priutina. They are not attacking. Maybe they don't have power. Maybe they've lost every single armored vehicle they have. Currently, it's very difficult to judge and to make the real conclusions about the Ukrainian situation. But the only thing that we know for sure, that no matter the situation with army, the Ukrainians do have drone army, drone power, drone forces, and they're using them and trying to bomb Priutina. But the thing that I mentioned on this video, that almost every single building in this village still have nice quality, is not ruined by the Ukrainian artillery. So that means that it's going to take a lot of time while the Ukrainians will be able to attack and to destroy Russian force and fortification in this settlement. And when talking about South Danielska, there were no updates at all, and so as you can see, the situation, it seems to me a small operational pause, another regrouping. I expect that right before the beginning of NATO summit, they will launch another offensive operation, another attempt, but if they calculate everything and understand that it's not going to give them any benefits, there is a very high chance that maybe the Ukrainians are not going to continue at all. So they will bypass this NATO summit, and after that they will start preparation before other operation, and probably by declining, canceling the Green Deal, probably the party started preparation before another battle, the Battle of the Black Sea. Maybe currently this is a more interesting battle for both sides. They need to test their weapon, and they need to test themselves, and to stop ruining their armies on the South Donetsk and Zaporozhye area. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce fightings from Petykhatki to, let's say, Ugledar, the Ukrainians lost 170 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 7 artillery systems. The losses is very heavy, but a little bit less in comparison with the previous days. Now we are going to talk about Donetsk. Also, no changes on the ground. The Russians reported they repelled at least 9 attacks. There was reco in combat. And the Russians report they destroy another ammo depot in Avdiivka of 110th Brigade, and the Ukrainians just published a series of videos how they continue hunting the Russian forces along the forest lines, using drones, using artillery systems, using infantry, and how they were bombing and shelling. And the Ukrainians claims that they showed the video how they were bombed the Russian positions before the beginning of counter-offensive operation, and after that we see the Ukrainian attempt to return control over the trenches that they lost during the previous months in the vicinity of Nivolska. This is their storming squads who are trying to capture this territory. So basically, for now, as you can see, this area is marked as the Russian control, but according to this video, according to this geolocation, this is not like geolocation from somewhere April, this is the recent geolocation of July. Basically, the Ukrainians launched counter-offensive operation, and maybe as a result of that attack, they managed to capture the trenches, and the Russians were forced to step back towards another forest line on this among the fields. So we'll see. We need to wait a little bit to get more information. And also the Ukrainians continue regrouping of their forces in the vicinity of Avdiivka and continue regrouping before the next wave of attack in the direction of these two settlements. Now we are going to Archimovsk, to this area. The most important thing is that the Russians shut down another Su-27s, my bad, that Ukrainians were using to support their offensive forces in the vicinity of Archimovsk, and probably while moving back, while returning back to the airport, the Su-27 was destroyed, shut down by the Russians somewhere in the vicinity of Novogrigorievka. When talking about Archimovskis itself and Klishchiivka, today we haven't received any videos, any geolocations, any updates, neither from the Russians nor from the Ukrainians, about any attempt to capture the settlement. Probably the Ukrainians had a lot of losses during the previous waves, and currently they're trying to regroup and prepare themselves before the final wave in direction of Klishchiivka. The Russians repelled every single attack. They saved control over the settlement. Also, they're doing some regrouping. They understand that Ukrainians will restart, and those attacks were made during the previous days. We saw a lot of videos were made by the forces of 5th Assault Brigade, 22nd Mechanized, 18th Air Assault, 3rd Assault Brigade, and today the Ukrainians changed their focus to the south, and today they were trying to penetrate the Russians' defense belt using the forces of 28th Mechanized Brigade and of course the forces of 24th Mechanized Brigade. The Ukrainians made at least two waves of attacks, two attacks in this area. All of those attacks were repelled by the Ukrainians, by the Russians, sorry, and the Ukrainians were using the forest belts to attack, and the Russians managed to discover, the Russians managed to coordinate and target the artillery, and they basically, the Russians destroyed the Ukrainian attack phase during the process of movements along the fields. The Ukrainians, as I understand, after the videos we saw, haven't managed to get even the combat line. They were completely destroyed in ruins among the fields, among the forest lines, and they haven't even entered the trenches. They just entered the forest line. They would try to dig in deeper, but the Russians discovered and bombed them and shelled them and destroyed the forces in this area. So the Ukrainians haven't managed to achieve any success. Maybe there are still forces, maybe they tried to dig in. Basically, with this level, maybe the Ukrainians managed to maintain the bridgehead, maintain the gray zone, but anyway, this is not the results that Ukrainians were, as I understand, expecting from this operation, from this southern attack, because the main purpose of that attack was to encircle Azaryanovka, to capture the forest line, to capture this residential area, and after that, after creation of such a bridgehead, let's say, this was the purpose, and from Mayors to the south of Azaryanovka, the Ukrainians were planning to attack Kurdyumovka and the same Azaryanovka from the south, and let's say to start the southern attack in Andreevka and Klishchiivka. But those attempts were failed, and now, as I understand, the Ukrainians don't know what to do. Anyway, there were very fierce fightings, and the main losses took place exactly in, let's say, Gorlovka bridgehead, and the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of those fightings, the Ukrainians lost around 500 soldiers, more than 1 battalion just on Donetsk front line, 15 armored vehicles, including 3 tanks and 3 artillery systems. The level of losses is significant and probably the highest, even as I remember the days of Battle of Archimovsk, when the Wagners were storming that settlement. I believe that maybe just 1 or 2 days were during that period of time when the level of losses was so heavy. So that was a very fierce battles, and the Ukrainians lost another day of that attempts. The Ukrainians published more videos how they were bombing and shelling the Russian back positions. For example, in this video we see how the Ukrainians discovered and destroyed another howitzer D-30 somewhere in the vicinity of Paraskovievka. Now we're moving to the Sever's front line. There were no changes on the ground. The sources are saying about very fierce fightings in Kremenaya Forest, but for now it's very difficult to geolocate and to understand the real combat line. The Russians are saying that as a result of duels and fightings with commandos in this area. The Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers. The level of losses probably is the lowest during the previous week. And the same situation, not very active situation on the Kupiansk front line. The Ukrainians lost 30 soldiers as a result of fierce fightings somewhere along the combat line and so on. And the Russians published another video how they managed to discover and to destroy Ukrainian Raider ANTPQ-49, very rare model of the Raiders, but that Raider was destroyed by the Russian drone in the area of Kupiansk. And another video from the Russian side, another that how the Russians continue bombing and shelling the border line between Kharkiv and Belgorod. We discussed that probably the Russians will make a barrier, and probably they have already started this process, and currently the Russians are trying to check to find the Ukrainian positions and to destroy their fortifications, their ammo depots, their fuel depots, to prepare the landing operation in this area. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.